Hello there and welcome to another Coffee with Colin, and thank you for joining me. Ruby Wax spoke at Pendulum Summit in Dublin recently, and she said something that intrigued me. She said stress is good. And at first I was thinking, is stress good? But she went on to explain that stress keeps us alive and vital. And there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and it's a little almond-shaped part of the brain that sits right in the middle here, but sort of between the back of the eye and the ear, in that space, the frontal portion of the brain. And its primary function is basically to create that fight or flight stimulus in us should danger threaten. We've all experienced it. You know, you're going through your day, or perhaps you're fast asleep at night, and then something startles you, and instantly your body is ready for fight or flight, instantly. So the amygdala kicks in and performs its function when those stress levels are required instantaneously. But stress in itself is in fact good. Stress, as I said earlier, keeps us alive and vital. Without it, we'd simply just waste our lives. However, we're also aware that too much stress for too long can be bad and can in fact kill you. We're aware of the dangers of stress. And the question really is, how do we determine between good stress and bad stress, and how do we manage the stress in our lives? And the answer lies in the gap. The answer lies in the gap. Viktor Frankl, who's the author of Man's Search for Meaning and himself a Holocaust survivor, he talks about the between the stimulus and the response is a gap, and in that gap lies our power. Think about that for a second. Between the stimulus and the response is a gap, and in that gap lies our power. That's where we hold the power to respond to the stimulus in a particular way. We're not automatically predestined to respond to any particular stimulus in any particular way, because it's within that gap we have the power to choose what our response is going to be. And Ruby Wax said something similar. In her case, she said that she found herself getting angry with stupid people, right? And she needed that pause, that gap, to have the red mist calm down. And I think we can all probably identify with that. But within that gap lies our power. So I think that in 2019, I'd like to propose to you, and certainly to myself, that in 2019 we should work harder to mind the gap. We should work harder to mind the space between stimulus and response, so that we can ourselves manage our stress levels and make sure that we're dealing with stress in an appropriate fashion, and make sure that we're only dealing with appropriate stress. And so how do we manage our stress? And the way we do so is by being mindful, by minding ourselves. I was at the Irish Primary Principals Network Conference earlier this week in Dublin, and a friend of mine, Dr. Niall Muldoon, who's the Ombudsman for Children, he was one of the keynote speakers, and interestingly he touched on the same subject, albeit from a different angle. He put up a slide from an author called L.R. Knost, K-N-O-S-T, and she says, taking care of myself doesn't mean me first, it means me too. I thought how wonderfully clarifying that is. Taking care of myself doesn't mean me first, it means me too. You see, self-care isn't selfish. We shouldn't feel bad. We shouldn't be made to feel bad for looking after our own needs. Back in 2018, I coined the acronym POYOOMF, P-O-Y-O-O-M-F, which stands for Put On Your Own Oxygen Mask First, and it's a phrase that we're all familiar with from flying. During every safety demonstration, we're taught to put on our own oxygen mask first, because only then can we be assured of being capable of looking after those around us. So self-care isn't selfish. Self-care is us looking after our own needs as well as others. And the best way we can do that is by making ourselves, our self-care, a priority. And I'd ask that we would all consider that more in 2019 than perhaps we did in 2018. You see, putting on our own oxygen mask first, minding the gap between stimulus and response, making sure we calm the red mist down, is good for us, and by extension it's good for everybody around us. And I'll leave you with an admonishment, if I may, that Ruby Wax left us with from the Pendulum stage some weeks ago in Dublin, where she said, fix yourself and then go fix the world. Fix yourself and then go fix the world. Put on your own oxygen mask first, mind the gap. And in conclusion, I'll ask the two questions, the big rock question and the one thing question. The big rock is, what is the big rock for you? What's the most important aspect of you looking after yourself, of you minding the gap that you know is out of whack, that you know you need to do something about? And then the one thing question is, what one thing could you do this week that would have the biggest impact on that big rock? And then go do it. And thank you for joining me for this week's Coffee with Colin. Make next week count, mind the gap, and I'll see you here this time next week for another Coffee with Colin. It's launching. I really love great coffee. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.